It has been a while since a horror film has piqued my interest, but when I heard about Good Boy coming out, my interest was very much piqued. That actually sounds a little bit weird saying Good Boy and my interest came. Ignore that. The selling point of Good Boy is that the entire film is from the perspective from the dog known as Indy, as we watch Indy and his owner Todd move into Todd's grandfather's house when supernatural things begin to occur. Now, of course, before we continue, this is your spoiler warning, so please, if you have not watched Good Boy, please go and watch it and then come back to the video. I would highly recommend it. Also, be sure to like, subscribe and ring the notification bell. And with that warning out the way, let's dive in. The main thing to remember with Good Boy is that the entire film, as mentioned, is from the point of view of Indy. Due to this, we very rarely see faces of humans, and also everything that is supernatural is from Indy's eyes. Therefore, it might not actually be supernatural. I'll talk more about this later on. The plot of Good Boy is very simple, but also tragic. We come to learn that Todd has some sort of lung disease, which seems to be leaning towards lung cancer. Indy is seeing Todd deteriorate, and due to Todd's health failing, Indy begins to see black shadows looming around him. Todd decides to move into his grandfather's house, where we seem to have mud creatures beginning to appear, and of course, caring for his owner, Indy tries to save Todd. As you can see, the plot itself follows a very basic haunted house plot device. There's not much to it, but that's why it does work well. Director Ben Leonenberg said that he got the idea after rewatching Poltergeist due to the tropes of haunted house movies, and the tropes are there. We hear noises, shadows, eyes in the darkness that vanish, evil creatures, even possessions at points. All the standard tropes are there, but with the added layer of a dog's point of view. And I would say that at points the tropes can hinder the movie, especially in the end when it becomes very easy to work out what's happening, but that doesn't pull the movie down that much. The acting in the film is really good, especially from Indy. Indy is actually Leonberg's dog, and throughout the production of the movie, Leonberg would give direction to Indy. Due to this, the dialogue had to be dubbed in post, but I believe it works well in the film's favour. In fact, the acting was so good that Indy has recently won awards. Really, Indy is a good boy. You see, sometimes you never see the humans' mouths move, it's always just a voiceover, and I think that's how Indy would see the world. You see, we come to learn that Todd has a terminal disease. He knows that he will eventually die, and in Indy's mind, Todd isn't Todd anymore. So when Todd talks, Indy could look at Todd and think, "You're not my human, who are you?" This even plays into the fact that we rarely see Todd's face. Of course, one of the reasons is that the focus is on Indy, and Todd doesn't really matter. But again, it could be seen that the disease is taken over, and thus, that's not Todd. The Todd that Indy knew isn't there anymore, so we don't need to see Todd's face. The cinematography and the visual style of the film is very well done, to the point that it seems very soft with its lighting, to the point that it seems like someone has lightly put Vaseline over the lens. It doesn't feel too threatening, even when the threatening parts are happening. Again, this is basically through the eyes of Indy. When all this bad stuff is happening, in Indy's world it's bad, but in reality it's not. The house is not threatening. It's just in Indy's mind. As the film goes on, we learn that Todd's grandfather also had this lung disease, and therefore it looks like it is hereditary. Todd's grandfather also had a dog named Bandit. Bandit actually begins barking to Indy through the vents in the basement. Indy also keeps having dreams about being attacked by a creature. Todd's health ends up getting worse to the point that the creatures start to attack him. Things get worse for Indy and Todd. As Indy tries to help him, he ends up getting caught in a snare that belongs to Todd's neighbour, Richard. Indy ends up getting locked into a doghouse outside, and Todd's coughing ends up getting worse and worse. Indy does eventually end up breaking out, but then finds that the cellar door is now open, where we end up seeing the skeletal remains of Bandit. Indy ends up actually making it to Todd as a dark figure approaches. Indy ends up comforting Todd, and as he turns round, Todd notices that his corpse is laying on the bed. Suddenly, Todd is dragged to the basement where he sees the opening of a dark tunnel. Indy runs down to try and save Todd and actually pulls him to safety. Todd, realizing that his fate is sealed, tells Indy that he is a good boy and to run. Todd then gets grabbed by the dark figure. It is the next morning and Todd's sister Vera finds his corpse. She heads to the cellar to find Bandit's remains and also Indy sat, waiting. Vera tells him to come here, but Indy is hesitant. We then hear a whistle from Todd, but unlike Bandit, Indy leaves and the film ends. As mentioned, Good Boy's plot is actually very simple, but it does leave room for you to think, and here are my thoughts on everything that happened in the house. I believe the film is about death, that's no question asked. There are no supernatural entities in Good Boy, even though the film tries to show them. They say that dogs can smell death, and from the start of Good Boy, we see the dark shadow begin to loom over Todd. This is because the disease that Todd has is terminal. There is nothing that can be done to save him, and throughout the film we are seeing death come closer and closer. It does not matter what home Todd is in, it will always get him eventually. The fact that the creature looks like mud or even tar is a reflection of the lung disease that Todd has. I do believe it is cancer, though the disease is not actually mentioned. His grandfather also had the same disease, and Bandit actually stayed and waited, which tragically caused his death. Throughout the film you see fox eyes and foxes. I see that Bandit is watching over Indy, and even in the end is seen when Indy is sat waiting. For a brief moment, Indy looks like a fox. In some folklore and spirituality, the fox can mean guidance, transition, and even a loved one's presence. Even though I don't believe there isn't an overall supernatural element, I do think that Leon Byrne made the fox with the context of guidance and transition, to the point that Indy would be the next fox if he stayed. I believe Good Boy is a film about cancer and the effects that it has on people, and I know this personally. I was diagnosed with stage 2 cancer back in 2024. Luckily, I have made it to remission. However, during the start of my treatment, I had a constant of what seemed like a black cloud looming over my head. There were days where the thought of death clogged my brain. I was worried about my funeral. What if the chemo and the radiotherapy doesn't work? What's going to happen to my wife and my kids? And all this time, I felt like Indy. These metaphoric creatures that Indy saw, as stupid as it sounds, I saw during my cancer. You feel lost, scared, and hopeless. But when you realise you have loving family around you who do care, it can get better, even though they are dealing with their own dark shadows due to the cancer. And this is why I loved watching Good Boy, and it actually broke me, because it's a simple film. However, due to what happened to me, it felt personal. Cancer is an evil monster. It can and it will drag you down into the dark pit of despair. But if you have someone like Indy in your life, things can get better. So please, go watch Good Boy, enjoy the film, donate to a cancer charity, or even just spend time with loved ones. And as always, take care.